Well, I am thrilled beyond belief to welcome Ian and Eshom Nelms, the Nelms Brothers, whose latest movie, Fat Man, is available now on demand. Yes, by the time we're recording this is actually opening day of the theatrical release, but we're going to be putting this out when it drops on demand, the week of Thanksgiving, possibly even Black Friday. And what perfect day to release a movie about a little boy who contracts a killer to take out Santa Claus on Black Friday.
Perfection.
Yes.
Yeah, it's gonna hit the sweet spot.
I am here again with David Fowley of Keeping It Real. And Ian and Eshom, you actually watched our hour-long or 45-minute review of Fat Man, and then for some crazy reason agreed to come talk to us. So that's very cool of you. Thank you for joining us. And how are you guys doing?
We thought, two fellow lunatics. Let's do it.
Kindred spirits, right?
Yes.
Kindred spirits. I think on this, we operate on the same wavelength in some ways.
I resemble that.
Oh, we're doing great, man. We're doing awesome.
Yeah, we're doing great. Thank you.
Cool. Now, I want to start off with the origin of the film. I mean, it's a crazy premise, and I just sort of touched on it there. There are, I think, three converging storylines. You've got sort of Santa in a midlife crisis, this bonkers subplot involving the military wanting to get in on his action to help keep his Santa's village solvent, and then also you've got the hitman kid story. So tell me about how this all started and about the evolution of the story as you got closer and closer to making it real.
Well, I think Ian and I there's something in the genre, right? You've seen the more kid-friendly versions of Tim Allen, which are great and they serve their purpose. And then you've seen the sociopath that comes down your chimney and hacks you up. And so for us, we really got excited about a space in this Christmas genre where we could do something really grounded, take this fantastical character, ground him, give him idiosyncrasies, foibles, and make him essentially a representation of people that we grew up with in the Central Valley, which is a blue collar person with real world problems.
So we were making him basically a real person. And then from there, we wanted to build on the fantastical elements and start to layer those on. Because I think for us, with a lot of the commentary that we have running through it or beneath the surface, you would say, we didn't want that to be disposable, because I think if we, in our opinion, if it was too hammy or too ham-fisted or, people are, shoving their hand up the ass of a reindeer and using them as a machine gun or something, you can just dismiss everything. You know what I'm saying? You can kind of just be like, okay, this is just goofiness. I don't have to take your commentary on society or the military or if on spending, capitalism, anything. I don't have to take your commentary because you're just goofing around. I get it. But we actually wanted to make a real human being and tell a real story and tell his plight and then build upon that, the fantastical elements, and really try to figure out how those would actually work and where would he actually live and how would he be able to blend in, especially in a time like today when you've got global satellites everywhere. You can see this guy. Who's that strange guy up in the North Pole there? But who's that guy in a small town that has a couple of barns on his property? That's what we were after. We were after that guy that could kind of hide in plain sight.
And we have a real reverence for Westerns. Our mother had the Clint Eastwood collection. So we would get a new Clint Eastwood classic every 2 weeks.
A new VHS copy of a Clint Eastwood movie.
And we would wear those suckers out, man. It's
everything.
All of them. And we would go through and we'd watch those relentlessly. And so I think there's definitely that Western motif running throughout the picture, sort of contemporary Western. So we wanted to get that engine in there that would result in sort of the, pinnacle, apex moment of a Western showdown with Santa Claus and make him a true badass.
And then it's got kind of that three-hander structure of these three characters. You're not quite sure how they're all going to fit in it at one point, but then they just keep swirling each other and it gets, that spiral starts to tighten and they all explode into each other by the end.
Yeah, the touches of Western are definitely in there and, kind of, has a bit of a thriller noir type feel to it. And, I know that you have those sensibilities of kind of like a pulpy yarn from Small Town Crime, your last film. Was this playing with those genres? Was that something you wanted to do here too, and just kind of maybe updating it and keeping away from what people are used to as far as a Christmas movie?
I mean, our absolute intent was to subvert your expectations. So we were like, this is what you've seen before.
Yeah.
And this is the left turn that we want to make at that fork in the road. So, and then obviously, in that Clint Eastwood canon, there's the Dirty Harry series. There are these thriller-esque moments in there. We really have an affection for thrillers. And so there's absolutely that running through this veins, right? So we have the thriller aspect and our affection for Westerns.
And then there's this sort of subversive comedy that's kind of happening, that those dark comedic moments where you put a lunatic after Chris, and his just overall confidence, his hubris on his way in is just what's, to us, is funny.
Oh, yeah.
Now, I think the biggest subverted expectations, which is almost a subversion of a subversion, because you are making a holiday film, is
sure.
how touching parts of this movie are. I mean, Marianne Jean-Baptiste, her performance, I don't know if this was in the script or if this is something that she brought to the role. It's kind of hard to tell just from watching it, but there's a warmth and a support of her husband's like crazy midlife crisis on top of some of these characters in the military that we get to know towards the end, when everything kind of goes to hell and you're like, oh, I don't want anything bad to happen to these folks. That is something that I was not expecting. Was that something that was sort of revealed to you as the movie was created through the editing process, or was it more deliberate from the script stage?
I guess
It's in the script.
it's in the script, and I like to think that that's exactly what we were after. I mean,
it certainly were.
and it's casting, really, right? You get the right person in there that you feel like is going to nail that. And Marianne, in our opinion, just having, before we cast her, just having conversations with her and seeing her past performances, she has a warmth to her that's just innate, whether she's playing that alpha, whatever, on SVU, whatever, you know what I mean? Like she's a cop or she's a detective or just her more intimate dramas that she's made. Like you can see an intelligence, an alpha, a very strong woman, but you can also see the warmth and the sort of motherliness that's behind the eyes. And that's exactly what we needed. We needed someone that was very strong, because when Chris starts to falter, and this is definitely not the first time, because you can see that how she's handling it. And those were questions that we were talking about with her. It's just like, this isn't anything new, she would say. And we're like, absolutely, that's exactly right. Like, this is something he goes into a funk. He's been diving into this funk. You're trying to bring him out of this funk. And she's like, okay, like, I think she's just a smart, intelligent actor that innately is able to channel those things.
And this is a dynamic that I think echoes our own parents. So our mother and father ran a business together. Our dad was a professional photographer for 20 years. And without our mom, that wouldn't have gone for 20 years. That would have gone for 5 years. The carpet would have been ripped up. All the checks would have been bouncing.
Because when she left to become a nurse, after running it with him for 20 some odd years. And she's like, I'm going to go to this nurse thing, and he's like, all right, yeah, cool. And she ran off to go to, she became a nurse and is now like she delivers babies. God, what is
labor and delivery?
Labor and delivery. That's actually what my mom did.
Is it?
Yeah, there we go.
Awesome. But she loves it. And I think that was absolutely her calling in life. But she was, for the first 20 some odd years, she was helping my dad with his business. And she was an incredible photographer in her own right as well. But she really was the backbone and the logistics and like keeping that place afloat and keeping my dad moving forward. And dad was the photographer out front and always having, he is actually more of like a Chris type of person. He's very introspective, but when or an introvert, but when he would be on these wedding sets, he would, or not sets, but people's weddings. When he would,
they're all sets to us now.
Everything's a set.
Exactly. When he would go to these weddings, we, since the age of like 10 years old, would be carrying all the bags, all the tripods, all the camera equipment. We were pack mules, but we were also the backup photographers. So you look in the back of the church shooting the altar shots, and it's a 10-year-old kid, all the way till we were 18. We were the secondary and the bag carrier for our mom and our dad as they went on and did weddings over the weekends.
It's a great experience.
But as you can see,
that's who those people are: the struggling business owner, the cowboy, our dad, his very strong and competent wife, our mother, how they love and support each other, and it's all just these little nuanced moments of love. I think which. I'm married, and we have those. My wife and I have those moments in between our serious moments, as I think everybody does, and that's what we're really trying to create. I mean, you got to push forward the drama of the character and the script, but you've also got to create those moments that you feel the real love and warmth between those two, so they feel real.
But there was also a fair bit of fun improv and play between Marianne and Mel.
Yeah, they just
honestly,
got
they
it.
just
They
got
just
along.
understood what they were going for.
It was a real blast.
They had great chemistry and they worked really well together. And in between takes, they're sitting there, you know, Mel's cracking jokes and she's punching him in the shoulder and they're just laughing and goofing around in between takes. It was great, man. It was a really, what you see between them and those sort of, you know, and those last 5 or 6 seconds of a scene where you get the sort of playfulness between them is exactly how it was in between takes with them. They were just so great and warm together.
I know what, you know, casting a movie is crucial. I think what makes a movie great is its cast and its script. When you guys are working on the script together, is there at any point, obviously you get the characters down, the setting, you know, you think about production when you're writing a script, but at what point did you say, we got to get Mel Gibson for this, and how did you do that?
So obviously this project's been 14 years in the making. So there's been other actors that we had discussed.
Okay.
But I remember in 2017, Ian and I went to a screening of Hacksaw Ridge, and
Mel was like right at the end of that, at the awards run for that film.
Sure.
He had this beautiful beard and he was like passionately talking about it, needing the beard, talking about it.
Worn down from the production
Worn
and the
down.
publicity tour. Like
Yeah.
it takes its toll on you. He was a man carrying a burden, looked a little threadbare. And Ian and I just turned to each other and we said, that's the guy. That's Chris right there.
Wow.
Because he was super passionate about what he was talking about, and you could just feel him and see him and hear him, but you could also see that he had a lot going on.
A little battle weary.
Yeah. So we were just like, that's the feel we want for this guy. And then 3 years later, you know, we get an opportunity to get the movie going after Small Town Crime. And that really was the problem. For 14 years, we would go places and they would say, this is a great script. I think it's cool, but what's the tone, you know?
Because this has such, it can go farcical or it can be where we landed it, you know? So it was like, what is the interpretation of this material?
And so we would describe it. Oh, it's on the page. Oh, this or that, or these 5 movies combined, you know, and that just doesn't cut it. You got to kind of have something that shows.
A little calling card.
Yeah. So when we got to do Small Town Crime, that was the first time we were ever really able to execute something with so many sort of tones and mashed together. And that really is what we were pointing back to when we go into meetings. We'd say, hey, the tone is this.
Yeah, it's a hyphenated genre.
And they'd say, oh, okay, I get it. You know, now I know how to read this script. And you know, we were able to launch that puppy. But when we sat down with Mel, so it's like, okay, you want to get Mel, how do you get him? So it was like, we sent it out to his agent. And of course, you know, things are getting curated and whatnot. At the same time,
we also wrote him a letter.
We also wrote him a letter. We wrote him a 1-page letter that was, you know, telling him why we thought he was going to be great for this role.
And amongst many other reasons, but one of them is that he looks absolutely amazing in a beard.
So, I mean, I think that's what pushed him over the top, really. So we told him, we wrote a love letter to him for a page, just telling him why we were so excited about him, basically. And we shipped the script off to his
went on with our lives.
Yeah, and continued to talk to production companies and financiers as all this was kind of swirling. And then we got an email from an unknown sender that it says, you know, the email name, but it's not like, hey, it's Mel Gibson 25 or whatever. It's not that email.
It's not like, it's like Mel Dude 25. That was not what we got.
Braveheart, Apocalypto, Hacksaw Ridge guy. So
Air America, you know.
Exactly. So we're like, okay, who is this guy? Is this just another producer or a finance company? Great. Hey, excited. He's like, hey, I love the script. I thought it was really funny. I want to sit down for a chin wag. That was kind of my only hint. So I'm like, okay, what's a chin wag? And yes, let's sit down and chat. You know, sounds great. Who am I talking with? He goes, oh, sorry, I forget to sign off sometimes. This is Mel. And I was like, hello. So we got very excited. I think we hugged. And then we called the agent, you know, or our agent called their agent and was like, hey, like, you know, the guys are excited.
Yeah, Mel, they'll do like a 45-minute coffee with you guys.
Yeah, a little 45-minute meeting for coffee. So we go to this coffee shop, we sit down and start talking to him. And man, it was 3.5 hours later, we all emerged from this thing and talking to each other on the way to the car. Like, I mean, we were so like,
we were just getting along.
We were really getting along really well. He was very open and talkative about everything. And it was just a wonderful conversation. And then we talked about film, we talked about the script. And it was this amazing moment when he was talking about the moment when he's standing on the balcony. He goes, that part where I'm standing on the balcony addressing the elves and I'm going to tell him this horrible news. He's like, I really feel like it's the type of moment where this guy's going to be almost near tears as he's telling the story. We're all, yeah, exactly. He's all, that's what's going to make it so funny. And we're all, yes. Like, that's where the humor is. It's not like, but it's like, that's where the subversive humor comes in, and you're like, oh wow, yeah, that's kind of a funny thing, like this fantastical character having to deliver these poor elves, this horrible news, and he's in tears. Like it's exactly what we were looking for, and he got that right off the bat.
That's great.
Now, when you were, David and I kind of talked about this, and it was all speculation when we were doing our review, but Mel Gibson has had a certain reputation. So was that at all a concern to you guys, or did you see any, it sounds like he was a great collaborator and just a cool dude to work with. So did you have any concerns when kind of getting into the movie with him?
Yeah.
Well, look, I mean, honestly, like, because
we don't know the man. I don't know the guy.
So we asked a bunch of people that had worked with him. We did our homework. We're like, hey, have you worked with him? Like
anybody that was either in contact with him, had worked with him, knew somebody that worked with him. We called all those people and said, hey, we want to talk to you. We've got something we're putting together. And
unilaterally across the board, they were like,
work with him, do it. You're not going to regret it.
You're not going to regret it. And honestly, like
almost every one of them was like, we love the guy. Like,
so we
go make the movie with
him. And we took the plunge, and we cannot say more positive things about our collaboration with him.
Yeah,
he was so immensely generous,
such a professional.
Yeah.
Such an amazing person. Like we had a really great time working with him.
And I think as a filmmaker, he understands what it takes and what he, as an actor, he needs to provide and do and be on set to provide the best possible outcome.
Yeah, we were in like it took 4 days to shoot that shootout, right? So it's negative 36 degrees, and we're knee deep in snow, and negative 36. And Esh and I are dressed like we're going to summit Everest, like the rest of the crew is. And Mel's in his Carhartt jacket with fingerless gloves. And he's like
sipping a green tea.
And it's like, hey, Mel, you're cut. Go ahead and go to the warming tent. There's a warming tent set up where most, anybody who's not working is literally huddled. And we're like, hey, go take a second, go take a second warm up. We'll see you in about half hour, 45 minutes or whatever, hour. And we turn around 20 minutes later and he's standing behind us and we're like, oh my God, hey,
did you not get the memo?
Like, you're wrapped for right now. We'll see you in an hour. And he's like, no, it's cool. He's like, there's no place I'd rather be than right here. He's like, you guys are out in this shit. I'm out in this shit. And it was so galvanizing to everybody. He literally would not go inside for 14 to 16 hours a day. And we weren't working in that much, but I mean, it was like he'd show up. He's got to get his coffee, whatever, it's long. It's a long day. It's a full day. Yeah. So he would be out there with us, with the crew, telling stories, laughing, telling stories, talking to everybody in between, ribbing the other cast members that are coming in to do their parts. And man, we just had a blast. And he was super like generous with his conversation. We're like, hey man, what about this on Apocalypto? What about this on Hacksaw Ridge? What about this on when you and Danny Glover were shooting this, he's like, he would tell all these wonderful stories. Wow. And we were just pumping him the entire time. Everybody was.
And not just us, like anyone. Like he's sitting there talking to the boom operator, he's talking to like the makeup artist.
The people who own the property would come out and be like, oh hey, doing? He's like, oh yeah.
Oh wow. We'll have to talk on the side some other time about all that because I want to know everything he said about his other movies. But
well, dude, he was like one little nugget is like he's like, on Braveheart, like I double printed these frames for emphasis, and we're like double printing frames, like we did that in FATMAN.
We're like, okay, writing that down.
We're taking every nugget we can.
Yeah, so we pumped him for as much info as we can. I mean, you got a guy that's that accomplished. It's like and we're big nerds, so we're just like, man, what was this like? What was that like? How'd you do this? How'd you do that? We're asking him how he did stuff, how he pulled off this shot, and it was great, man. It was really great.
It sounds like a great collaboration, and I was wondering, I know that you have these characters in mind when you're writing them, but I often ask writers and directors this is how much did those characters change once you got the cast locked, you're starting to shoot? How much did these characters change, and did you care?
It's really hard to see because once you go through the process of a movie and you finish it, it's really hard to see it any other way.
Because you're like, I can't see anybody else in that role but this person. It's like,
so it's really hard for us to say, oh, well, we had this preconceived notion before Mel.
But what I can say about a lot of the actors coming in and putting their flavor on it, like let's take someone like Walton, right? So Walton comes in, we have a meeting with him at a coffee shop. He's talking about the role, the lines. He literally stands up and starts doing some of them in a crowded coffee shop, telling, like, going through it. And it's just like, he could just
pull out the gun, and I'm like,
he's like, I'm there's an elf. And I'm like, what the, he's standing up and people are like, what the, but he zones it all out, and he's able to just pincer it right in. And he's there, and he's that way on set. He's that way when he wants to channel it. He clicks it. He can channel it. It's amazing. But yeah, we had that meeting with him, and we're like, dude, he's the guy. He's great. Now, was he like
in our mind's eye?
In my mind, no.
Yeah.
But he found that, and I believed it, and I wanted it. So then when we got him on set, he'd had a couple months to churn on this guy, and he's building the character as well. So he's layering this guy up for us, and when he gets there, I mean, the last thing I want to do is be like, well, Walton, actually, back in the script, we were thinking he'd be a little drier in this delivery. No, like, we hired this guy because he's super talented, and he's going to bring something. He's going to bring the pain to this role. So we're literally like, he's the right guy. You just trust the instincts of that actor, honestly. And of course, if we get 2 or 3 takes in and we're like, but the first thing we as directors want to do, we like to do, is let the actor run with it for 2 or 3 takes. And if for some reason there's some nuance or something that's off, you hope that you've cast it well enough that person is really close. And then you just say, hey, I'd love to, can we do this or try this? Or, hey, that was like, we got it. Basically, we call it juggle some chainsaws. Like, let's try something crazy, do this or do that or blah, blah, blah. And if we have time, we like to do those. But usually you hire the right person, you get a great performance, and they do their homework and they build this person out. So it does change a little bit, whereas Walton's like, I'm thinking like when he was a kid, and you're like, okay, yeah, that's great. That works really well. That might not have been perfectly exactly. Or Walton will say, what were you guys thinking when you wrote this line? What would that mean to you? And we'll like, oh, well, this is why we wrote that. This is and he's like, oh shit. Okay. Yeah. Oh, okay. And he'll incorporate and he'll build on it. So yeah, it's a real collaborative process.
That's what I was going to say. It's a true collaboration. And look, you put the portrait on the page, right? The written page. And then you have that conversation. You have a conversation with the actor, and that portrait evolves a little bit. And then when you get to the set, that portrait's going to evolve a little bit more, and that character's going to become more defined.
And it goes back to that same question you had with like Marianne or with like with Mel. It's like they come on set, or even Chance, like with these experience, and Chance is young, but he's pretty damn experienced. He's more since he's like 5. So you get these guys on set, you get these ladies on set that have a lot of experience, and they're smart and they're in tune with their emotions, and they're able to sort of build these characters on top of what you've given them. And if they have questions, they hit you up. And if you don't, you let them run, man, because these people are talented. And that's why you brought them in.
I'm glad you brought up Chance, because I'm not familiar with him. Maybe I've seen him in other stuff, but it didn't, I just didn't recognize him. So this is kind of a first for me. What struck me about his performance, it reminded me a lot of what Christian Bale did with Patrick Bateman in American Psycho. I don't know if it's just because they have a sort of a passing resemblance, or if it's the suit, but there's something very deliberate and particular about his brand of sociopathy. I was wondering, is that something that you picked up on, or am I just imagining things?
I can't say that we directly referenced American Psycho.
Not that. We definitely didn't give
I don't know.
Chance. I want you to go out immediately and watch American Psycho.
I already watched it.
Yeah. The Chance didn't research.
I've already
Psycho.
seen it. Would have been the best response.
That's great.
I think there was a sort of fastidiousness, precociousness to Chance, and that was sort of on the page, right? And then obviously the set design and that collaboration enhances it even more. And then you have costumes and his hair, and it all sort of coalesces into Billy.
Yeah. But I mean, when we sort of searched, we did like a star search, 80s star search for him. So we literally just basically blanketed out and said, hey, send in a tape. We want to find somebody great for this role, because there was no like quintessential like
12-year-old.
Oh, this 12-year-olds, we got to get him. So it was like okay, and he sent in the tape, and man, we watched it and we were like, oh wow, like he really stood out.
It was
so good.
It blew us away, and we're like, maybe it's too good.
Like, is this guy? How tough is this kid going to be on set?
Because we didn't know, is this him? Right? Is his dad just turned on the camera and like, hey, Chance, do your thing, But we got to get this kid on Skype. We got to see how he is.
And so he gets on Skype with us, and he's couldn't be a sweeter human being. And we're like, oh wow, he's just that talented. Okay. And so then it was he tells us, he's like, he's like, do you guys want to do any adjustments? Do you guys want me to do anything different? And we were like, oh yeah, well, hey, here's an adjustment, but try this, videotape it, come back to us later.
And with actors of his age, like you want to be protective, right? So it's like, hey, traditionally, go home, you know, like work with your acting coach, send back the take. Like there's this whole like.
You definitely don't want to feel like you're sitting there like, you know, it's a kid, so you any actor really, but you don't want to sit there and like try to feel like you're beating up on him and trying to get a performance out of him. So it was like, yeah, hey, we'll give you a tape. You give us a tape version of it and send it back. And he's like, oh no, I'd rather do it right now on screen right now. And we're like, okay. He's like, yeah, just give me a direction where you guys want me to go and I'll do my best. We're like, okay, I actually really like this. We're like, damn, okay. So we give him a note and then he goes, okay. And then boom, he knocks it out of the park. We're like, wow, okay. He's like, anything else? Can we try anything else? If you want.
And then now we're just like, let's throw him a real knuckleball, you know?
Let's see what chances we got here. So we give him another note or two, and again, he pirouettes, lands it, sticks the landing. We're just like, man, this kid is really good. And that really came in handy because on an independent film, you don't really have a time sometimes. You know, sometimes he's at the front of the day and he gets, you know, a lot of time up front, and it's like, okay, no problem. But then there's always times where, you know, where he was like stuck at the end of the day and okay, Chance, you got 45 minutes to nail this scene, you know, sorry.
And you got to be clutch right there. And
really you got to be good and you got to nail it. And it's got to be something where both of us, it passes our mustard tests and we're ready. Like, okay, yes, that was great. And he delivered every time. There was and he knew his lines and he knew what nuances he wanted to play with. And he wasn't stuck in a performance in that. And he talks about it a little bit. I've seen him do some interviews and we've actually chatted with him about it where, you know, his experience on this TV show that he's on, I can't remember the name of the actor that had been like, you know, sort of working with it, not necessarily working with him, but he had been working with in scenes and getting advice from and thoughts. And the guy was just telling him like, you know, you always got to kind of mix up your performance a little bit, even though you're in the same pocket, like, have fun with it. Don't, you know, feel loose. And that comes across with him. You're like, wow, how is he so good? And like, it's just every take. He's got that. He's able to just let it all fall away and just be himself and know where he's at and stay in that pocket and be able to, oh, he's emphasizing this line on this time, but it still feels really natural, you know?
And with the kid, we definitely knew like, there's no way we didn't have time or the budget to coax a performance out of anybody.
So we needed somebody really good that was close. And he was, Chance, he was the perfect.
You got him.
Destroyed it.
Yeah. One question I had, I was thinking about, I watched Small Town Crime this morning again. I know David watched it a couple of nights ago. It's one of my favorite films. And I noticed that it's kind of a smaller scale film than FATMAN, certainly. I imagine the budget was smaller, but you still get a lot out of the film in terms of the action, the car chases, the gun work. But in FATMAN, you're going to a lot more locations. You've got a much bigger scope in terms of the action that you're trying to pull off. So I guess my question is, as filmmakers, as independent filmmakers, as you're graduating up and up and up in terms of the budget and also the ambition of the stories you're trying to tell, how do you psych yourself up for taking on these next challenges? And do you have any sort of mentors or people that you lean on to guide you through that process? Or you just say, man, we're just going to go do it and see what happens?
I guess it's a little bit of everything, right? So like you do a movie like Small Town Crime, and that was the first kind of time we were able to actually do any action. But we also didn't have enough of a budget in that film to hire like, you know, a second unit director that was going to come in and do all the action scenes and really help us out. So we had to sort of lean on some of the stunt people. We're like, hey, can you jump this truck like this? Or can you do it like that? And then really collaborate with them and say, hey, and I think Don Shanks was our head stunt guy on that. And it was like, he's like, well, how do you want me to do it? You know, and you don't have a guy there that has the lingo, you know, it's just us trying to, you know, like trying to tell a composer through band, you know, lingo.
But we also storyboard out everything. So we have we know what we want and we'll show the pictures.
And that's what I was going to say. Like, you know, we know what we want to see, and it's just, now you're working directly with those collaborators, like the stunt guys or your actors, and you're saying like, this is what it looks like, and this is what we're thinking. And then it's just, you got to put those images together and stack them up in the edit, you know?
I don't know that the scale of the movie matters on how you approach it. Does that make sense? Because look, when we were making Small Town, and while it was a drastically lower budget, the same problems presented themselves in FATMAN, because you're always trying to do more than what you have. So it's like, if you have to always try to deliver twice the picture that you're
financed. Especially in those action sequences, like let's say the shootouts, and one in they were equally as hard for different reasons. But one in Small Town Crime, you've got like, what is it, 5 players. You've got like 5 or 6 guys running around in a playground, let's say. And in the other one, you have 2 guys moving towards each other. And they were equally as challenging in different ways because of elements or just a chaos of things that happen on set all the time. And then, but it's the same process all the time. You're like we like to get a visceral experience from those shootouts. Like we like to shoot them a certain way that makes us feel a certain way when you're in those shootouts. And as you know, we don't like to do all this sort of quick cutaways. We like to sort of stick with it for a minute and then get into the action and then cut it back out and take a second for it, cut back out and use your over the shoulders to get you right there with him as you're moving in for these shots, you know, so you feel like you're in the battle with them. Yeah, so we didn't approach it any different, but even though you have more money and, you know, hopefully it's affording you more time and more, I guess, experienced collaborators in some of those things, like effects guys and whatnot.
And we've been blessed to work with the same director of photography on our last 3 or 4 pictures, Johnny Durango, wonderful collaborator. And then Ian and I, look, we really lean, like Johnny's like what we always say is our third Nelms brother. We've worked with him now so much. He's part of the family. And then
he's got a great shorthand with us. We have a great shorthand with him. Again, it's almost like when we're writing, you know, and you're like, oh, da, 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 and you got the scene, you're like, great. And everyone else that was sitting around listening to you is like, what just happened? You know, I don't understand what you guys, so what was the consensus, you know? And you're like, oh, well, here's what we're going to do. Well, it's the same thing with Johnny, you know, like we move into a scene and it's like, oh, he looks over the boards. He's talked to us about it before. And it's just kind of, he gets the gaffer moving and, you know, Mateo runs off and does his thing. And then we're moving and we're shaking and hopefully moving a lot faster than we would be if we'd sort of started fresh with.
And Ian and I honestly like lean on each other a lot. I'm really grateful to have, you know, a partner in crime here because it's not an easy road, and it definitely is. Sometimes you need someone to either kick you in the fanny or give you the rah-rah speech.
Yeah, there's always those times where you don't feel like writing today, or you're not, whatever, you know, you don't feel like doing whatever today.
Are you having a crisis of confidence?
Whatever,
it might be.
You know, whatever, and that happens to everybody. So it's always like, you know, nice to have somebody that you're working with that.
You're beautiful, man.
Let's go, you know, let's get up this morning and kick some butt. You know, we cheerlead each other all the time. And the sounding board is clutch. Like when we're writing, it's like, is that a good idea? And, you know, you can kind of, if you have questions about it, then that other person is there to say yes or no.
Well,
That's
one kind of ancillary point to that is something that struck out to me watching FATMAN is the scene where Walton Goggins is driving into Canada. And you've got the actual Canadian border crossing bit. Now, in Small Town Crime, where you have to shut down a street so you can do like an action scene where a car does a U-turn in traffic, I can imagine that's got its own kind of logistical issues, but it's not like trying to film the Canadian border for a movie. When you're writing that, are you thinking, oh, we got to go fill out this paperwork or ask these people, or you just, you know, do you have the support network and those people that you've just been talking about to pull it off?
So here's what you're thinking.
Yeah,
I love that you're asking this question. This is
the magic of the movies.
Because this is one of the things that we were most nervous about while making the film. So
it's like, what locations can you find?
So right? It's like the better question is, how do I cheat the shit out of that and not make it look like we cheated the shit out of that? That's the real question. How do I make that look like we're crossing the Canadian border? So
when it's actually the hockey rink entry gates.
Those are
no.
Yeah, and our wonderful production designer went in there and was like, I think if I just kind of do this, and this, we'll have it. Yeah. And we were like, okay, we're gonna get the CG in there, and we get to post, and they're like, you don't have enough money to do that. We're like, oh, right. Okay.
But it looks good,
but it looked good enough, you know. It looked good enough, so we were able to sort of pop in with that. It was great. But yeah, that's literally a parking lot. Panned up anymore or panned over anymore. You just see it end into a dead field.
Like I remember Walton walked up, he goes, "Oh man, y'all are smart."
He also walked up and was like, "Well, look at Canada over there," and it's just a dirt field.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, Eshom, but you're the guy boarding this movie, right? You're the storyboard guy.
Oh yeah.
That art school education.
Right. So when you're, you know, kind of, you know, going along with what we were just talking about with those shots, are you thinking about budget and stuff? I know a storyboard artist has to think about lighting and angles and stuff, but you're also the director, so are you thinking about budgets and whether we could do this or not?
Absolutely. I mean, Ian and I approach every scene with, I mean, look, the storyboards are literally like precisely the camera angle to crop out the parking lot and like to frame the buildings against the booths. Like they're
I would say the
meticulous.
most amazing thing, because he's been doing this for 20 years, 18 years.
Wow.
However long we've been in LA, 17 years, I think. 17 years. We came here in 18 years, 2002.
It's getting there.
Whew. Okay. So he's been storyboarding since we first came to town. And obviously he's gotten a lot better at it as he's gotten older and done it more.
Thank you.
But the most incredible thing is to like try to check what he's doing, right? Because like he's so incredible at like putting a 3D rendering in his head of like what it actually looked like when we were there and remembering it when he's drawing it. Because he's not drawing it on set like Ansel Adams looking at the you know what I mean? He doesn't have like, you know, he's not sitting there like have a perfect portrait representation.
Yeah.
He looks at it, walks around it, and then he goes back and like 3 days later when he's storyboarding that scene, he's got it out there and I'm like, are you sure we can't see the dirt field from this angle? And he's like, yeah, it's fine. I got it. And 99% of the time he's right. Like, he's like, it's like, and it's literally down to the point where it's like, no, it's got the guard arm up there and we can literally get right at that. You know what I mean? He's like, he's clipping it out by fucking frames, like by
But this
inches.
this one was, you know, we had to thread the needle, right? Like,
Yeah.
Let's just use the homestead, Chris's homestead as an example. Like, if you pan the camera left a foot, you got houses and above ground swimming pools and trampolines. And if you pan it to the right, you got
The most amazing thing,
the damn cell phone towers.
the most amazing thing about that location was that we were driving down a road, a suburban road with houses on each side, and sure, there's a lot of trees, but I mean, it's suburbia, you know, like Canada, backwoods Canada, suburbia. So you're like driving through there and looking at all these places, and we saw this road on a satellite map.
Yeah, because we were looking through locations on Google Maps. And we were like, okay, like that kind of looks like it might be
We
a
were
farm.
looking for geography mainly. We were looking for a house and 2 barns, and you know what I mean. We're looking for that. What can we find that we don't have to do the most building on? Because we didn't have a budget to build. Not a lot. So it was more like you get to a property, it needs to be 90% there, and then you just kind of touch it up, you know? So that's what we were looking for. What's the best route here that we're not going to kill it? It's not going to kill us in the builds. So Ash is looking at the satellite. He finds this place. It looks like it's got a big piece of property, but then you got to actually go there and look around and be like, can we actually shoot it at an angle here?
And mind you guys, like we've been on the road with the location scout for 5 days. We've probably looked at
150 farms.
Yeah, like 100 farms.
And so
all over Canada.
We pull up to this road and it's called Homestead Road. And in the script, it says Chris's Homestead. So we're like, good sign, maybe. So we make a left on Homestead.
We pass the above ground trampoline.
And you're going through people's, driving through their backyards, basically. And you're just like, this isn't going to work. I mean, my God, we've got pools and trampolines and barns and driveways. And it looks like a mess. And then as far as what we're shooting, their houses are wonderful. But I'm just saying, as far as what angle, it's just impossible.
Yeah, trying to sell this for rural nowhere, Alaska.
So then we get to the end of the road, we make a right onto the property, and that pops you out in between the barn and the house. And you're looking out over this
beautiful
snowy vista and the trees. And so we literally would walk around the property, talk to the owners first, of course. So we walk around the property just looking for angles that are going to clip out all the tree or all the houses that are hiding in the trees. And that's literally what we did. And then we brought Johnny out there and said, okay, here's what we're thinking. Let's put the real screws to the test here. What can we do, Johnny? And he's literally walking around with us going like, and he's taking pictures. And then from there, Ash built his boards.
And there's there's a handful of VFX shots in this. So we had to, map those out, like when Chris descends into the factory underground, those are simple green screen comps and things like that.
So we had to dig a hole. And then it's funny because it's like, the production designers like digs this little hole like 4 feet deep, and we're like, yeah, like wait, 4 feet.
Well, we gotta walk down there.
We gotta get down there. He's like, no. It's the rules. You can't dig a hole on a set any deeper than 4 feet. And we're all,
really?
Well, that's not gonna work. Was he gonna crawl through this whole army style to get down there? He's like, no, I'm just gonna build it up around it like this. I'm gonna do this. I've done it before. Don't worry, guys. And Chris has a lot of experience, so we're like, shit, okay. So he builds this thing. We come back like 3 days later, and it literally looks like the entrance to a tunnel. It's 8 feet tall. We're just like, wow, okay. So he put 4 feet on the top and 4 feet down, and it looked amazing.
Wow.
It looks like a hole leading down. I couldn't believe it, but it certainly does.
Wow.
That's funny.
David, did you have? We're kind of coming to the end of our time here, but I've got one more question, David. If you've got another one or two.
Yeah, I got one more really quick. I know that you guys must be fans of vehicles and specifically extending certain characters to their vehicles, like making the vehicles an extension of their characters. So obviously with Santa, there's the sleigh, and I appreciate the minimal exposure to the sleigh in this movie, but talk about Walton's vehicle. I'm not a car aficionado. I know that John Hawkes drove a Nova. What is he driving here and why?
There's a couple reasons why he's driving this car.
Yeah.
So it's a Monaco. So it's a Dodge. It's an old police cruiser from the 70s. So like a 78 Monaco, I think it is.
And obviously that relates to when he pulls out that police car out of his pocket at the end.
Okay.
He says, "This is the only goddamn thing you ever got me." And he throws it at him. And then it's obviously layered, but the car that he's driving is the exact model of that police car that he has. So, and as Santa gives precocious gifts to these kids,
Like it might be able to divine your
he
path.
should have been a police officer, but he had such a shitty childhood and went such a bad direction that he became a shitty, crazy maniac. But he still drives that same car, so he still has it in him. He just went the wrong way, you know. He became a villain instead of a superhero.
And the other side of that is that's the same car that Schwarzenegger drove in the original Terminator.
Which one?
Nice. Nice.
Obviously, his was like the actual police version.
You mean sorry, not the original Terminator, Terminator 2, and it was
Wait, is it
Robert,
Patrick? No,
isn't it?
whatever. Well, anyways, in Terminator, he drives the Monaco Terminator.
I think it's the second one. I think it's the cop. But anyway,
That's
yes.
probably
We
Robert
were
Pattinson.
inspired
It's
by
the first one.
Is it the first
It's
one?
the first
You're
one.
positive.
I'm
Okay.
certain. I'll
All
put it
right.
Okay.
on the Bibles.
All right.
We'll fact check that. No, actually, so I've got two more questions real quick. As far as the mythology of the Fat Man world, how well thought out was that versus what showed up in the final script? Because we've got obviously, I suppose, millions of these specialized toys that have the Made in the Santa's Workshop plaque on the bottom, and the military knows about them. So I'm assuming that everyone has just kind of accepted the fact that there's Santa in the world. So if that's the case, how have things been allowed to get so crappy? You'd think that would automatically put everyone on the nice, like, got to check themselves for niceness thing.
Man, I think honestly, you just sort of become desensitized, right? So
It's almost exactly what you said, right? In my opinion, it's like we all know that there's a good and there's a bad, right? So it's like that, but that doesn't seem to curb anybody's behavior as far as like
not all the time, at least.
they think is good or bad. You can always, I mean, people are psychologically, they are very good at telling themselves why this is acceptable at this moment in their lives, and they don't feel like they're a villain or they wouldn't be doing it. So I think you tell yourself certain things at a certain point to get yourself headed down a certain path, and by the time you get to the end of that and realize you've become a bastard, that you made a lot of little choices and it was a death by 1,000 cuts, you know?
There's also like the consequences for being tragically bad. I mean, Billy is tragically bad.
Yeah.
And he gets a lump of coal. Like, that's not really a consequence.
that
you know what I'm
bad,
saying? Like, so that's where the sort of arc of the story is that Chris needs to sort of ratchet up this intervention.
Because we were playing with the idea in that he'd been sort of, in our minds, he'd been sort of lackluster,
like a little on autopilot.
In not like for the last few hundred years, and everything has just been kind of slowly descending into a shit fest. And he has slowly been getting depressed and not knowing how to pull himself out of the quagmire. And then it comes to a point, as it always does, it builds to a head where now something needs to be done because little kids are sending hitmen to kill me. Now,
Reach the threshold
I
where he
have
must.
to do something. Like
Yeah.
we have come to a point where it's gotten that bad, and now he's finally actually galvanized. And that really was one of the big themes we were working on. Is like, if you want to make a change, you know, if you want to do good in the world, you have
be
to
proactive.
personally take action. And even if it takes one kid at a time or one person at a time, that's how you got to do it.
Excellent. So my last question is sort of about the through line that I've seen in at least Small Town Crime and in Fat Man. I have not seen Waffle Street, though I really want to. I got to go do some more homework. But you seem to be interested in stories about men who are going through sort of a crisis of transition. People who had these ambitions, who have really lost something and have to sort of reawaken something themselves, largely through tremendous sacrifice and pain. Is that a theme that you're consciously working out and evolving in your films, or is it just a theme that you kind of think is dramatically interesting?
I think that it's both. I mean, it's definitely something we're drawn to because we keep doing it in different ways. But yeah, I like that you just said it, and I went, oh yeah, that sounds great. You know,
Well, even thinking back to Lost on Purpose.
Yeah,
I mean, it's really interesting. Like that theme absolutely comes up over and over again, and I think it's something that Ian and I really relate to, the everyday struggles of life. And for us, we wanted to put this fantastical character and give him the everyday struggles of life.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Well, this conversation has been anything but a struggle, and David and I cannot thank you enough for being so generous with your time. I personally am looking forward to Fatman Returns, Fatman Forever, and the origin story of Fatman Begins. Yeah. There you go.
Yeah, it's been great talking to you guys. I hope we can keep in touch, and I'm looking forward to your next projects.
Absolutely, guys. Hit us up anytime, please.
David, Ian, thank you so much, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you, gents.
Awesome. Cool. Thanks, and take care. Best of luck.
And congrats.
Yes.
Thank you.